Gavin, I really enjoyed the novel myself when I read it, and you've adapted it for the screen. Instead of the action being spread out over a number of years, the events are condensed to a number of months, which for me kind of really upped the urgency and the intensity. I just wondered what your overriding principles were as you went about adapting the material.
In adapting the book to the screen, I had to find ways of. I almost needed rules for myself in order to cope with the sheer volume of information and the period of time that is in the book. And as a fan of the book, it's quite intimidating because you want to do the best possible version of it that you can in this different medium of film, but you have 2 hours in which to do it, give or take. So how do you do it? So one of the first things I thought is I need to compress time. Because I didn't want to be changing actors on the audience. He's 6 years old at the beginning of the book, but he is 13 at the end. So I thought, what if I look at him at that point, when he's still a child, but he's on the verge of manhood, if you like, but he's still believable as being someone who'd be naive, influenced by adults, and then stand up against them. First thing is compress the time. Second thing is how do we do what the novel does so well, which is to get inside this character's head. The novel describes very well what he's thinking, what he's feeling, these emotions, the conflict that he has between his capacity for compassion and kindness, represented by his sister Valentine, and his equal but opposite capacity for violence and aggression, represented by this bullying brother Peter. And these different aspects of humanity and our capacity for violence and compassion exist within the lead character. How do you preserve that? And how do you describe what he's feeling, which an author might take a few paragraphs to tell you? How do you do that in a film without boring voiceover? So that's about creating scenes where actors come up against each other, and then you're able to photograph. I have living actors, which the novelist doesn't have, and find reactions from hopefully very talented actors that give you those nuances in a second. You get, wow, I see how he's been affected by this. He's uncomfortable, or he's jealous, or he's angry but can't show it, those nuances in cinema. And then there was the fun aspect of how do I take the cool stuff of the battle room and the simulation cave at the end and really visualize those iconic set pieces from the novel in ways that will hopefully stand the test of time and be visually beautiful and exciting. So I had a lot of fun coming up with the glass sphere of the battle room and working with my production designers and Ben Proctor and Sean Harworth and fantastic visual effects supervisor Matthew Butler and these very talented people in designing this beautiful space where, because we're in a glass sphere, we get a sense that we're up in space. Otherwise you're jumping out into a black box, which you are in the book. And also where you can change the lighting for every scene. There was four scenes, I think, in the movie where you're in the battle room. And I wanted each one to have a different mood, which is also by shifting mood in film, you create a feeling which the novelist has described in other ways. What did it feel like to be in that battle? Part of the way we generate a feeling is through light and shadow and so on. So I have different tools as a filmmaker to a novelist, and it's my job to try and generate the same feeling, achieve the same sense of the struggle that Ender is experiencing, but as if I were photographing his life experience, whereas the novelist is writing about his life experience.
We see you credited in the end titles as the Giant.
Nobody else has asked that. Good for you. You stayed through all those end titles.
Oh yeah, I always do. I love the end titles, and the score was beautiful, of course, as well. Steve Jabonk's score, but how did that come about? What did that involve?
Yeah, somebody buried in the end titles. You're right. Is I played the Giant, which of course, as an actor, you never let that go. You always want to be an actor, right? The ego just still wants to be part of that wonderful direct creation of a character. And I think it was just also a budget issue, man. We're shooting we're shooting the Giant with all kinds of, I've got all kinds of dots. I think there might be some B-roll of this all over my body in a studio which has got 70 cameras around it, recording digital information of the movements that I make, so that the animators, who did such a fantastic job, this company in Barcelona, just amazingly talented people who made me look like this fantastic giant. So all I am really is a framework for them to draw on. I'm like, connect the dots, And I had so much fun with Matthew Butler, my visual effects supervisor. I mean, he and I were there, just the two, well, we had a team with us, but the two of us, he's playing the mouse, and he's got this little mouse on the end of a stick, and he's moving the mouse up, and I'm playing the giant, boom, and doing all this stuff. And then we've got all this data in the system, and then you can go in and then take the camera and literally film it in the virtual environment. So what was fun for me is I didn't have to ask an actor to be in a certain position when I knew I wanted the camera there at that angle. I could just have the body there and then know that I was going to photograph it a certain way and, satisfy my own ego's need to act again.
And your eye looks like it's recovered well since then.
The worst part was that mask going into my eye. I mean, still trying to get over that.
So something about films that are very visually impressive is that occasionally they can leave you cold when it comes to the actors' performances or even some of the thought-provoking material, and that's one thing that this film very much delivers on. You mentioned the nuance that actors can deliver and sort of tell you quite a lot with just a look, and obviously your acting background. How much do you think that your acting background helps you when it comes to directing the actors of the caliber you have in this film as well, which are incredible?
People ask me about coming from an acting background and how that helps, and I think it clearly helps me understand what an actor is going through. It's a very different thing being on. They're very vulnerable. It's a very vulnerable thing to be an actor. You're there, and yet you don't have total control over this process. You're giving of your best, but this director might screw it up. The editor might screw it up. Who knows what's going to happen? So it's a vulnerable place to be, and I love actors. Having been on that side of the camera, I understand that vulnerability, and I'd like to think that my job is to know when to help, when to push, and when to get out of the way. And you don't always get it right. Sometimes you irritate your actor. Sometimes you deliberately irritate your actor. There's nothing worse on screen than a lack of internal energy. Even stillness, which someone like Sir Pen Kingsley is just brilliant at, that total stillness. But it's not stillness. It's not boredom. He's alive because that inner energy is pumping. And then stillness is powerful. And because I've trained as an actor, and I've trained in many areas of acting, been put through the ringer in method acting, worked in classical theatre, I understand actors come at work from different positions. And my job as a director is to say, how does this actor like to work? Because you can get to a result using different means. I love working with actors. I think they're amazing people, and I hope I respect the vulnerability that they feel up there. And I'm very proud of the cast we have here. We have Harrison Ford, who's this icon who, again, has this extraordinary presence. Harrison can be very still and yet intimidate you. And yet he also has this, as a human being, this incredible kindness and sincerity and no bullshit, excuse the language. And so working with him, he was so generous towards Asa Butterfield as a young actor, who again, for that role of Ender, you needed an actor who was highly intelligent and yet humble and yet with some guts and some pushback. Very complicated character to play. Viola Davis came on board to play Anderson. There's very few actresses who can, in a fraction of a second, reveal so much emotionally. And so putting her with Harrison Ford in those scenes where they don't agree on how best to raise the child Ender gives us a sort of parental relatability, if you like, which I like in the movie. I think what's important in any of these films, we as human beings respond to characters and stories. We need to relate. We need to connect. We love to be shown other worlds. And so it's great that we have a sci-fi movie with really great visual effects, and we worked really hard on all that. But we all know as an audience that we can go to a visual effects movie and we get bored with cool kind of quickly. It looks cool. It's great in a trailer. But if you're going to keep me for 2 hours, you better tell me a story. You better let me connect with people. And those people better be relatable, and what's relatable is that we as human beings are not just one thing. We're complex. We're not just good or bad. Even when we're bad, we think we're good. So having actors of this kind of caliber, Hailee Steinfeld, just fabulous as Petra, as the young, tough female hero, but who's also vulnerable and just wants a friend, and Asa needs a friend, and all these dynamics. I could go on for hours. Love my actors.
Gavin Hood, thanks very much.
Thank you very much.